Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 674. Releasing in theaters across the US beginning in New York on August 28 is Boorman and the Devil, a documentary that delves into the making and legacy of the notorious sequel, The Exorcist II: Heretic, and the impact the film had on its director, Sir John Boorman, featuring interviews with Linda Blair, Louise Fletcher, and Boorman himself, among many others. Boorman and the Devil is a fascinating and engrossing exploration into the methods and madness behind one of cinema's most infamous movies. And joining me now to talk about the movie is the film's director, David Kittredge. David, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. As soon as I saw the email for this film come across, I was like, I need to watch this movie because The Exorcist is my favorite film of all time. And The Exorcist 2, of course, is just an incredibly notorious kind of film, especially for like horror buffs and Exorcist fans as well.
hmm
I clearly remember the first time I saw Exorcist 2, I was way too young. It was a double feature on free to air here in Australia, so it must have been late 80s, early 90s. It was Exorcist followed by Exorcist 2. I was nowhere allowed near to watch The Exorcist, but Exorcist 2, people were like, oh, we don't care about that one. And I remember the scene vividly with the Louise Fletcher going under in that spell, and
Uh-huh.
the Pazuzu demons holding onto a heart and Reagan's onto a heart, and I was thinking, what the hell am I watching here? And I couldn't watch it anymore. I was too young. And then I got back to it much years later. Do you remember the first time you watched The Exorcist 2? And what was it about the movie when you watched it that really kind of started this kind of fascination with this film that led to this documentary now?
Well, the first time I saw it, I was probably in my teens. I was in my teens, and it was on Betamax at home. And it was the shorter version, which was the only version that was like available anywhere for a very long time. It was one of the old Warner Brothers giant poofy clamshell tapes, the really big
Right.
ones it was like, it felt like a plush doll. And I remember I had seen The Exorcist. And I really loved it. I watched Exorcist 2, and again, this is the short version, and I thought it was interesting. I didn't think it was as bad as I was expecting it to be because it had a reputation. Like you'd already read like, oh, it's one of the worst movies ever made and all this stuff. And I had not seen any John Boorman movies other than this. So I didn't know what to expect. Even though I knew John Boorman's name, I just hadn't seen any of his films at that time. But it wasn't until I saw the original US cut, the long cut, which Warner Brothers Home Video released in the mid 90s. And that was the first time I saw with the whole movie, the happy ending, all of it. And that really kind of blew me away. I felt that movie was so interesting and different and unique, and it obviously had so much going on, trying to it had so many ideas. And I was fascinated by it, not just because of what I was seeing, but because just that it was made at all and on that
Mm.
level, that budget level, because this was the sequel to the third highest grossing movie in history at that time. So it was a huge phenomenon, The Exorcist. And it took the biggest budget in Warner Brothers history. They gave it to John Boorman to make this film, and it's so far afield from The Exorcist. It is a very different movie, tonally, atmospherically, visually. Everything about this movie is so different, and I think audiences uh, were put off not only by that, but by the fact that like Exorcist 2 honestly really isn't a horror movie. The Exorcist is a very scary movie and very intense. Exorcist 2 is mostly about ideas and about like this story of spiritual growth and what does it mean to, invite evil in like, does great evil like get drawn to great goodness, which is like Martin Scorsese talks about this with regard to this film, like it's like Job. Um, so I started to read about like how it was made, and every time I read stories about how it was made and what happened, it just got even more interesting. Like this is, I think, possibly the most interesting story of any movie being made that I am aware of. Not just because of the huge ambitious swing that Boorman and his team took to make this very different movie that was, almost inevitable to like let people down who were expecting to be scared. But also the fact that it was made on such a huge budget by a huge studio as a huge summer release. Like they thought that this experimental art film, Exorcist 2, was a mass market like hit. And at that time in the 70s, that wasn't an insane thing to think because the 70s had so many movies from American directors that were trying different things, that were being subversive, that were trying different narrative ways of telling stories and really confronting audiences and making them work for it. And audiences liked that at that time, which is really, I wish we had audiences like that now, you know? Um, so yeah, I mean, it was just a journey, and then I got in touch with John Boorman, and he, after a bit of a courtship, he agreed to talk with me on camera, and I shot him, and his interview. I mean, he chose to be that open and vulnerable with me, and I will be forever in his debt because he didn't need to do that. He could have just answered questions, but we ended up talking about, his art, his life, what it means to make art, like what it means to make films, what it means to be ambitious, to try to make ambitious films, because filmmaking is just one of the most difficult things you could possibly ever do. It's like the most difficult medium to work with, and it takes gobs of money and teams of people, and it's so difficult, and everything goes wrong, and every time a film is done, it's like a miracle. And if it's a good film, it's a super miracle. So, um, yeah, it's like to take that kind of a risk and to put it out there like that is it's something that I greatly admire, and I think the movie should be respected for, even if you don't like it, Exorcist 2 has to be respected for the swing it takes. Because my God, I don't know another movie that went so hard so far. And it didn't connect with audiences, but it was still, my God, what a swing.
But also, the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. It comes down to, I think, delving into the investment that the filmmakers had in the films themselves. It isn't
Hmm.
just a picture to be done, and then it's on your credits and you move on to the next thing. They put themselves into these films to such an extent that we see in this movie that Boorman is essentially, you know, has like illnesses that kind of derail him for weeks,
Yeah.
because of all the stuff you want to do in the film. And the ambition of the filmmaking during that process is
Hmm.
really, on one end, you have to just admire the gusto about it. But at the other end, you
Yeah.
kind of question, geez, just how far can these guys go? Because Borman, I think he tested the limits of how far he can go to create this movie. Because a lot of this movie,
Hmm.
you'd think it's shot on location, but that wasn't the case because the places they wanted wasn't available for one reason or other.
Yeah.
This was
Yeah.
shot in, was it, I think Burbank Studios, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
when he's in
Almost all of
the
the movie. It was shot in
he,
the Burbank studios. Even exteriors were shot in the Burbank studios.
so when he wanted the desert, he created the desert. He was
He did.
practically God on this set, and that led a calamity for him because his vision came to life, but it came to a very strong personal cost on his part.
Yeah. He inhaled the dust that he had trucked in from Central California, not knowing that the dust was infected with a fungus called the San Joaquin Valley fever, which people
Right.
still get in California. Every once in a while. There's no treatment for it. You just have to, get past it. But he got a very bad case. They couldn't figure out what it was. They shut down production for 5 weeks. He had spinal taps and all sorts of medical tests, and he was in the ICU at Cedar-Sinai. He almost died. Um, yeah, so it takes a special kind of person to direct a movie like this. Somewhere between, yeah, commander and lunatic and artistic, warrior. And but the one thing that is in the documentary, because we talked to a lot of the crew,
Mm.
is how loved Borman was.
Yeah.
They all loved Boorman, like, as exacting and perfectionistic and as he was, he everyone had such respect for him and such warmth for him. Um, it was really something. And it's so funny because like you hear stories about Friedkin on The Exorcist, especially. It seems like almost the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Like nobody liked working with Friedkin on The
No.
Exorcist, and or some other movies too. And I like William Friedkin, um, but Boorman has a lot of love, and it's this, and I feel like you can feel it in the film.
Yeah. Something a perception I had from the film as well. You can correct me if I'm wrong, here,
Hmm.
David. When Borman's talking about the movie, especially when he's talking about the notion of doing a sequel to The Exorcist, it felt like to me that when he watched his opinion of The Exorcist as a film was one that he didn't like. He admired the filmmaking, but the film itself he didn't like. To the extent where when it comes to comparing the two films, the sequel to the original, he said his film's about love, where the other film was about evil. That's kind of like a quote that comes from the film here.
Good.
I
Yeah,
have,
he wanted to make a film about goodness. Yeah.
yeah, and I had a little bit of a gripe when I came to hear that because The Exorcist is my favorite movie of all time, and
Hmm.
I'm gonna put a theory towards out there that The Exorcist is a movie about love in regards to a sacrificial love because at the end of the movie, the main character in the film, and people tend to forget, Linda Blair isn't the main character in The Exorcist. It's Jason Miller's character, Father Karras. He
Hmm.
sacrifices himself, which is the ultimate form of love, to save the girl. So to me, it is kind of like a movie of love in many ways. And I think
Hmm.
something that Boorman didn't really tap into when making the sequel is that the movie, The Exorcist, the first one, it wasn't about the gore, it wasn't about the head spinning. The movie to me was a culturally religious film, it was a culturally Catholic film, which I think why it touched a nerve in '73, to the point
Hmm.
where there were a number of film critics actually said that this movie felt like a propaganda piece for people to go back to church, which is because afterwards
Oh, it is.
supposedly it was a big throws people go to church. And I
It
think that's
absolutely
where the
is. Yeah.
movie, I think that's where number two kind of just missed the boat there because he went away from the core principles of that kind of cultural menu in the movie and tried to
Well,
make something else with it.
he went the opposite because basically
Totally opposite. Yeah.
the first movie is a passionate argument against secularism.
Right.
So basically, it's saying like, okay, Ellen Burstyn, you're a movie star and you have all these cool friends and you're at dinner at the White House and all that stuff. But you know what? When your daughter gets sick or possessed, it's the old dude in the priest outfit reading the ancient books that's going to save your tale. Like none of the doctors can do it. None of anybody else can do it. None of your secular friends can do it. It's a very, very, very patriarchal and conservative message, that film. And it's not about love that he sacrificed. It's about faith. That
Mm.
movie's about Karras refinding his faith. And Exorcist 2 is almost the opposite in the sense that it's about science and religion working in tandem and allegedly being about the same thing, which is a quest for truth.
Mm.
So Louise Fletcher's scientist character kind of, dismisses the religious stuff as whatever, and religion, of course, dismisses her hypno machine. And yet it's due to both of these things working that we find ourselves at the end. That it's a passionate argument against blindly believing in religion. Like that's part two. So it's in a lot of ways an upending of the conservative, uh message of part one. I mean, it's very easy to make a conservative movie. It's just like, yeah, 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 we have all this information. Yeah, well, you know what? It's all about the ancient text. So goodbye. It's yeah, you can, that's an easy, very simple good versus evil. That's one of the reasons The Exorcist is so powerful. It's extremely simple. It's an extremely simple story. And I'm not going to say there aren't levels because I think it's extraordinarily character based, but it's a very simple, you can summarize that movie pretty quickly. Exorcist 2 is not simple at all.
No.
Exorcist 2 is filled with gray area and uh, things that can't easily be put into columns. And it requires the audience to work a little bit harder for it. And the problem it was audiences weren't wanting that, and they didn't want a movie that has like kind of interesting and different and mystical ideas that go beyond the kind of simple doctrine of like good versus evil, believe the priest and ditch the doctors and whatever. I'll also argue that Exorcist 2 is a feminist movie, whereas the first movie is not in any way a feminist movie. Like
Mm.
you have this woman played by Ellen Burstyn who is a very successful single lady raising a kid on her own, doing fine, and like, who saves her butt? It's the priests. In this movie, it's like, who saves everybody? Oh, it's Reagan, you know? She finds her power. And yeah, you can talk about like whether or not that's like, an arc that really is a big arc, because she starts out pretty, happy and she ends up pretty happy. But um I think the ideas behind it are far more progressive and far more feminist in the second one. You know. And again, I
It,
mean, a lot of horror movies, if you boil them down, are conservative. It's like, how many slasher movies are just like don't have sex?
right.
It's like the kids that have sex, they're the ones that get it first, right? So it's like, what's the message here really? You know? Um, you know, Horror is about subversive thoughts and feelings. Horror is about, it tries to unearth things within us that we're afraid of. And we all grow up with people that at one point or another tell us like, it's this way, it's black and white, good or evil, this or that. And I think that a lot of really excellent horror movies even fall into that, and Exorcist is one of them. Which is not to ding The Exorcist. That's the story it tells. But I do think there's probably room for other horror movies, and not that Exorcist 2 is one. It's its own thing, I think. Um, but with other points of view.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere.
The other interesting thing about this movie is that you're talking to John Boorman, who's
Hmm.
directed a sequel to The Exorcist. But
Hmm.
amongst your many great talking heads you have in the movie, you're talking to Mike Flanagan, who is now directing a sequel to The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Timeline-wise, when you're talking to Mike, had he already signed on for this Exorcist
Oh,
sequel,
that's
or was it
that's a
something that
very
had to
interesting
happen?
question. That's a very interesting question. So, okay, so what happened was Mike Flanagan was literally the last interview we shot, and it was in early 2025. And he had signed on, but then there was a question after we shot him whether or not it was going to go forward because there was
Mm.
talk about the studio not liking the budget or the direct whatever it was. Studios they do that. They make announcements. They're like, wait, do we really want to do this? And finally, and there was a moment because I think we had a lower third on him saying like, Mike Flanagan, writer director untitled Exorcist sequel, and we had to change it after the Venice Film Festival because I think that the film it was not confirmed, right? It's like so we checked it all out. I mean, we didn't like, step on anybody's toes, but we had to change that lower third. And then months later, Mike got the green light and went ahead and I changed it back and I okayed it with him. So that's the lower third that's in it now. So I by the way, I cannot wait to see that film.
Mm.
I only know kind of like what he told me, which is like a very basic plot line, like and I can't say what it is, but I really, really, really want to see it. And I love Scarlett Johansson. I think she is a phenomenal actor. And I think if anybody's gonna do this property right, it's Mike Flanagan. I can't think of a single person in the world who could do it better.
Final question here. It's really interesting how the impact that this film had on the careers of everyone involved, but especially Boorman. I mean, this thing was
Yeah.
a huge budget and it didn't do well. And to this day, people talk about worst movies, blah blah blah, and all that stuff. However, he can bounce back years later with Excalibur, which in itself is such an ambitious project. I mean, it's a fantastic film too. Um,
Yeah.
it made me think of the last 10 years or so, how many directors have taken on really ambitious, well, no, I would say ambitious, but big budget movies, and they fail, and you don't hear from them again.
Hmm.
Does it say something about our time or Borman's time where he can bounce back and make another film and continue to have a great career? Or does it say something about our time in that once you fail, your route. Next person on the conveyor belt, they're going to take on the next big studio movie. I find it very fascinating, kind of like looking at the two eras and how the different impacts a box office bomb can have on the filmmaker.
It's a hard question to answer because I think that one of the things I've known, I mean, I think there is a difference now that it is harder to bounce back from a big failure. But I do think that if you've made a movie, or certainly like Boorman at that point had made Deliverance, which was a huge, huge hit, and he was
Mm,
nominated for it. He'd also made Point Blank, which is amazing, Hell in the Pacific, which is really cool, Zardoz, which is I tell everybody to see Zardoz. It's so good, but it's like it's definitely like go in, buyer beware. It's a very strange movie, but it's
mm,
really, really good. Um, I think that if because he made Deliverance and Point Blank, I think he would have gotten another shot even today. Um, and I think ironically, the reason he got Excalibur made, Star Wars kind of blew Exorcist 2 out of the movie theaters.
yep.
Um, Star Wars was one of the big reasons Excalibur got a green light, because at that point, everybody was so blown away by the success of Star Wars, aside from the science fiction stuff, which everybody was making. um, the studios were looking for hero myths, like Joseph Campbell hero myths, which is, Star Wars, of course, takes a huge, Joseph Campbell. It's a lesson in Joseph Campbell, that whole movie. And, here's Boorman saying, by the way, this movie that I've wanted to make for 20 years is the ultimate Campbell myth. It's King Arthur. It is the Joseph Campbell myth right here. It is exactly the fucking same. And finally somebody listened. And but I think that the trauma of having made that Heretic, he didn't do anything film wise for like at least a year. Like he
Yeah.
was just I can't imagine how traumatic it must have been to work that hard on something with that much care, because you love it or hate the movie, there's a lot of care put into Exorcist 2, The Heretic, and you
Absolutely.
can tell. And to have it be that rejected, and for his talent to be questioned, and he questioned it himself. Um, Excalibur is a work of fury by an artist with something to prove. I don't think Excalibur would be as good as it is had he not gone through the trauma of The Heretic, and how it was received. And it's funny because, like, you look at the risks he took on The Heretic, he takes so many risks on Excalibur. He compresses the whole myth to 140 minutes. Like, I don't even know how you do that. That's crazy. It's like,
Today will be like an 8 episode Netflix series, right?
yeah, I mean, it should be. I mean, it's like that's a really long, big myth, but he somehow telescopes the whole thing pretty effectively into one movie. And that is a full meal of a movie. And he takes risks, and people say crazy stuff, and the armor is like mirrored, and there are
Hmm.
crazy lighting choices with green, the whole thing is so dreamlike and crazy. And yet, for what it is, it's like he totally trusts his instincts, and it could have failed. He literally, I think he believed that after Excalibur, he would never get a shot again because he thought Excalibur was going to, at times, he thought it was going to bomb like the Heretic did. And so, and if it had, I'm pretty sure that he would have had a very hard time making anything else for the rest of his life of any budget level. But it didn't. It was a huge hit. And I think he got his mojo back. And I think that if I say anything with Boorman and the Devil, the doc, is that if you're going to be an artist, these risks are mandatory. You don't get an Excalibur without being given the opportunity to make the Heretic. We can't have the nice things if we don't also risk the things that may not work. And I think part of that goes on to the audience too. I mean, everyone's allowed to like whatever they like, but it's like I I don't think movies are these like pieces, like grocery items, like pieces of content. These are actual works that were worked on by people. And it bums me out that some people, and not generally young people anymore, it's really people my age, like don't actually show movies the respect like that a lot of them really deserve. And Exorcist 2, I don't think has ever been given the respect that it deserves for the technical innovations and the narrative swings that it takes. And um I would be the first one, and Boorman would be the first one actually to say that it doesn't totally work with an audience. But, you know, I'm really grateful that it exists, and I want to see more movies that take huge risks, even if they don't succeed. They're more interesting than the movies that don't try much and like are fine. Like, how many movies have you seen that are just fine? It's like, give me back my 2 hours. I want to see some crazy movie that like just swings for the stars. And yeah, maybe it doesn't hit, but it's like, wow, what a trip. Let's go on that journey. I want to see what these artists that are passionate, that actually care, that actually try stuff. I want to see what they want to do. I don't want to see this whatever this whatever it is that doesn't try much.
Well, it's a fascinating exploration, a fascinating discussion that comes part of this fantastic documentary, Boorman and the Devil. I got to say, David, I get a lot of kind of making of movie documentary stuff come my way, and I this one is, if I was going to do my tier list, near the top, if not the top,
Oh my
because
God,
it's
thank
fantastic.
you.
How you make this film is
Thank you.
fantastic. The animations, the editing, the interview heads, all of that stuff, and Boorman himself, I think, is a captivating and reflective man, and the way he can talk about his film and his philosophies behind it is fantastic. And for everyone out there, so August 28th, film opens in New York.
Hmm.
September 4 rolls out California, other places. I'm going to have the links in my show notes because I want people to watch this movie in theaters because it
Yeah,
hasn't been seen
please.
in theaters. It's
Please.
important that we get movies like this watched in theaters,
Yeah.
and people go to theaters to watch movies that people. There's more than Odyssey and Spider-Man out there. Let's just
Yeah.
get that right. This isn't like Happy Meal hour. Okay, we got stuff out there, man, and
But
Bournemouth
this
and the
is
Devil is
also
awesome.
thank you. I really appreciate it. It's also it plays, and I'm very thrilled to discover this. I didn't know this before the festival circuit because I've been running around with it at the festivals for the last year. It plays really well to an audience. Like it's
It
fun to
does.
watch this movie with an audience. There are a lot of like laugh moments, and there are a lot of. It's really wonderful to see this with an audience that's with it all the way through. They're laughing 15 minutes in, 30 minutes in, 45 minutes in, like the whole way through. And then at the end, you can hear a pin drop. And it's so satisfying as a filmmaker, especially working on as long as I did, um, to watch an audience really just love a time out at the movies and come away with this this really warm glow. It's really nice.
Well, I truly appreciate your time, David, and I'm gonna leave now with a warm glow as well because you are very passionate and just really behind your film and your filmmaking. And I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your movie. Because
Thank
before
you
I
for
review
having
this,
me.
I had one opinion about Exorcist 2. And after I watched it, I watched the film again last night and I looked at the film in another lens. So thank you for that. And
Yeah,
I hope we can talk again in the future. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
I would love that. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.